two things. How is the Christian school screening the kids and the families that are coming in? Are the families themselves running from something, or are they running to a Christian school? I think that matters, and I bet we're going to find, just a hunch, that this is a troubled young person who came from a troubled place and is probably relatively new to that school. Welcome into this latest edition of Making the Leap. Glad to have you along today on, unfortunately, what is another one of these shows where we have to start with something pretty heavy, and the fact that it actually hits a Christian school strikes particularly hard for us, but it was the news around it and what was involved in it that sort of interested me. As we record this episode, we still don't know everything that there is to know.
Right.
But there's something very unique about it. We're talking about the school in Wisconsin and Madison called Abundant Life Christian School. It is a elementary through high school Christian school. About 400 students. And the suspect, the shooter, now dead, was a 15-year-old girl.
Yes.
And what seems to be the case, again, as we record this, and we don't know a ton, but what seems to be the case is this is not someone, as it had been originally reported, is battling with transgender issues, to my knowledge, or anything like that, but it is a very troubled 15-year-old girl, obviously. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to ask you about this morning, as we, again, record this, and maybe we'll know more by the time people listen to watch this episode, the first thing we ought to know is Christian school does not protect you from bad things. This is the second Christian school that something awful, just awful, has happened. So Christian school is not a panacea. Bad people get into Christian schools too. Security, let's start with that. And then we want to get into kind of a featured interview that I want to tell you a little more about. But I thought it was interesting just to kind of get your point of view. How secure can you make a Christian school?
I think... Well, how secure can you make the White House? How secure can you make any business, any place that we go into, right? I think if someone has a desire to do something horrific, they're going to figure out how to do it. Yep. I think people are, fortunately and unfortunately, they're creative. Kids, so much so, like they can figure out all kinds of ways to get around any kind of system we put into place. Adults can figure that out. So I think it's as secure, I think, as it's going to be. It's never going to be. There's never going to be a perfect solution. I read a lot about people saying, well, why weren't there metal detectors? Like,
our kids' school, our daughter's school, I cannot imagine a scenario where our daughter's Christian school installs metal detectors. In fact, I wouldn't want that if they discussed it.
But I will say, I do know there has been, I think, a little bit of pushback here and there on the security measures that have been put into place at our school.
Which have been beefed up in the last year.
100%.
Since the Covenant shooting.
Yes. And I think it was already in the process of being, like you said, beefed up. Like it was already there. And then it kind of went one step further. And I know some of those measures because I'm a substitute on occasion in the building. So I know some. I think what's more important is that there are more measures in place that I don't know anything about. Yeah. And I think that's important, that in a school, there are things happening, that there are layers and levels that the kids don't know. I don't know. I think you need transparency to a point, but at the same time, why are you advertising if you go to the store, this system, we have an entry system that now you have to scan in kids as well every day, every morning. Scan, I think they scan or they type something in. I have to go ahead and type something in, pictures. I know there are cameras. I know the door lock issue. That's a big one.
Doors locked around the building,
the perimeter.
Only one way in.
Right. It's one entrance. I know that, for example, when I subbed, the last time I subbed, I had, because we have some, modular type units, I had to leave the building, go into another one. Well, I couldn't get into the other building. There's a lot of layers and things, and I shouldn't. Like somebody said, they should just give you a key. And I thought, no, actually, I'm good. I'm good. It should kind of be an effort, I think, to get in from one place to another for someone like me who's not a staff member constantly there. So I think they're as secure as you can make them. We also have somebody, I think, in charge of our security who has a good, solid thorough base of knowledge, I think you can't put the random group of parents in trying to figure things out. I think for that, you need to go one step further. You need to get out. You need to you need to get police officers, resource officers, military, ex-military. You need to get people who don't think like you and I might think. I lock our door at night. I lock all our doors at night. What does that do? Right? Because there are always ways in and around things. You need somebody who's going to be like, that lock doesn't work at all, but if you do this measure and this measure, that will work. And but it doesn't even matter because this was a student that got into the building regardless of what security measures were in place. It was a student who belonged there. Right. It was a student who was supposed to be there. So none of that matters at that point, right? The cameras don't matter. The entrance system doesn't matter. Yes, that's where somebody would say metal detectors, but I think we've got to go beyond that.
And I have some thoughts about the student in a minute, but I do want to talk about, again, this is just one pair of people's opinion. Right. How beefy can you make a school's security? Do you need physically armed people, school resource officers, someone staffed there as a security person full-time? Is that what Christian schools have to do, need to do, should do?
I do think all schools should have somebody there. I think they should have at least one person there who is armed. And I know that goes against what some people believe. Well. I have zero problem with an occasional extra staff member being armed, because I think generally the ones that are armed are trained, and they're trained well. So I don't personally have any problem with that, forgetting whether it's Christian or public school. I think what has to be taken into account is if you're going to do that, it's going to cause annoyances and hardships for people.
It's going to cost money.
It's going to cost money, and people are going to have to decide what matters most. I'm without a doubt satisfied with what our school does. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's annoying to be turned away, and I have been, not at our school currently, but at our old school. They knew me. I walked up a couple times to get in. I forgot, I didn't have my wallet, I didn't have my ID. They knew exactly who I was. I had to go back and get it and bring it back. That's annoying. It's necessary. And I think if we kind of wrap our heads around some of that, that's just how it is. But it is expensive. However, I will also say, then there also has to be a piece of how you create community. When it's rule, rigid, you still have to be able to create some kind of community, because I think a community piece is also where breakdowns can happen. When all of a sudden you're limiting who comes in, how many times, what they're doing, where they're at, which is necessary. You also still have to have ways to, how do I know this parent, and this parent? How do we cross grade levels? How do we cross at sporting events? How do we create those kinds of things that allow for communication and knowledge and relationship? Because relationship is actually, I think, more at the root of a lot of the problems if you had a lighter security thing.
Do you know what I'm hearing running through my head now, having done this podcast for a little while? Homeschool parents saying, this is why. Is it.
Yeah, well, a homeschool parent can also walk into a grocery store, a mall, a business, anywhere else, and encounter any of this. So it doesn't, we're not guaranteed anything. We're not safe anywhere. We're guaranteed nothing, right? We're not protected from anything. We have good security in this building. That is zero guarantee.
Yeah. And how then do you assuage the fears of young, our daughter, I won't lie to you about it. She's got a lot of anxiousness about this. She hears about it.
Sure.
I heard a woman say the other day, gosh, I'm glad my kids have graduated so I don't have to think so much about this. It's sad, but that's the way a lot of parents think. Whew, I got my kids through school without some sort of incident.
Well, I think that's just as faulty of a logic as saying, I got my kids out of a public school. Don't have to mess with that. Well, yes, you do. Because again, you're still in a community and you're still part of something.
Well, that brings me to the next point of this story. And here's a guess. And again, as we record this, there may be more that we learn later that I don't know now as we're talking. So I'll stipulate it, and I'll come back and correct the record if I'm wrong on this. But here's my gut. This is my gut, and you tell me if you think I've jumped to an incorrect conclusion. This troubled 15-year-old girl was not at this Christian school beginning in kindergarten or first grade or second grade. I have every reason to believe, if I'm a betting man, and we've talked how many times on how many shows about this, Christian schools struggle with this open door concept of come on in, and we talk all the time about people leaving public school or leaving a troubled situation and saying, I got to rescue my kid. I got to put him or her in this Christian school. two things. How is the Christian school screening the kids and the families that are coming in? Are the families themselves running from something, or are they running to a Christian school? I think that matters, and I bet we're going to find, just a hunch, that this is a troubled young person who came from a troubled place and is probably relatively new to that school. Otherwise, you got a real problem in a Christian school that's allowing a young woman to, as I read what she believes, became very angry and very troubled under the noses of that Christian school, which yeesh, then you're talking about something different altogether. So what do you pick?
I have not read
It's speculation,
yet. Right.
so we don't know.
We have no idea. If I had to guess, my gut reasoning says she probably entered at some point later than a kindergarten or first grade. That would be my guess.
And this is what Christian schools have to deal with. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
So here's a troubled young woman, and I don't know why or the circumstances of taking her in. What's a Christian school to do with someone this troubled? Surely they recognize it. You'd think if it's a Christian school worth their salt, you'd think they'd recognize that kind of this isn't, public schools, maybe not as much. They're bigger and complex, and they're not as intimate. Christian schools traditionally are. This is only 400 students.
Right. I was going to say 400 students is not gigantic. We're I think a little bigger than that 400. Definitely there are families I don't know anymore. Of course. I mean, we came in late anyway. There's families I don't know. There's parents I don't know. Family situations I don't know. However, I do think we have a good system in place that asks probing questions that have reasoning behind them when you are bringing someone in, right? When somebody is starting to enroll in the enrollment process, they start from the very beginning, and you can figure out a lot from conversations, from attitudes of kids, from attitudes of parents. Who are the parents? What are they doing? How are they raising their kids? And of course you can fake your way through a lot of it, but you can only fake your way through so much, because let's say you get through all those layers, then you're in the classroom. Well, now you're around students, you're around multiple teachers, you're around parents if they have volunteers. So now you've got a lot of eyes on that. And at that point, it's really hard to hide and fake that everything is well and good.
Is it possible that you can be that disturbed and angry, if in fact what I'm seeing she's written is true? Is it possible to be in a Christian school that disturbed and that angry and go unnoticed if the school is doing its job? I just can't believe.
I'd like to say that's not possible. Again, Christian school or public school, I've been in the public school sector, right? Yeah. We knew the kids that were struggling.
Yeah.
We knew, even if a parent were to deny there were struggles, we saw it. So I think there's no difference in who cares what the four walls contain. There, you have gut intuition, and maybe my gut says one thing, but there might be other teachers or administrators who are like, I'm not sure on that one. Now, hands are tied, I think, more in a public school setting. As far as I'm concerned, private school, your hands are not tied to that extent. You might have some pieces to walk through, but if you see somebody, if you know you've got a student coming in with a whole host of issues, and we're getting to the sociopathic side of things. When you see that, your hands should not be tied.
And I hate to speak ill of the situation or the school involved, but if you're running a Christian school or you're teaching in a Christian school and there's a young woman, 15 years of age, who's a ticking time bomb and walks into the school and starts shooting, this may be unpopular to say, I really have to call into question procedures, policies, and just general overview and attitude at Abundant Life Christian School. I'm sorry, maybe it's unseemly to say it in the shadow of this horrifying thing, but I just refuse to believe, and maybe this is naive. Yes, bad people do bad things, but this didn't happen in a vacuum to a 15-year-old girl. In fact, girls never do this. This is what's even more unique. Young women do not do this.
Right.
She, if what I read is correct, is uniquely angry, particularly about men.
Right.
Which is another whole component culturally.
Right.
Which tells me, again, she was not brought up in this school if this school is doing its job. So then you take in someone that's this angry with that kind of outside attitude
Right.
and try to inject them in a culture at a Christian school. Good grief. I can't help but think there are Christian schools all over the country assessing, our walls are starting to bust at the seams. Who are these kids and these families we're taking in? And while I realize it's compassionate of us as Christians to do it, how do we know we're not importing people that are really not well?
Or what are your systems for removal if you see that you
or
have
evaluating
that?
in the first place?
Right.
I don't think that happened before she
No.
got there,
But
or after she got there.
I don't think so. That for sure. I mean, we don't know. So I guess, again, correct the record, right,
Yeah.
if we come back. But I would guess we talk a lot about the evangelical, we're a discipleship school versus an evangelical school, or we're a covenant school, all those things. And they all have systems in place. But I would think maybe, I don't want to throw stones at Abundant Life. They have enough right now going on. I do think soon there should be some evaluation, but it's kind of like that cliche, right? You can't, the horse escaped. You can't close the barn door now.
But I hope every other Christian school is evaluating.
But I hope they are, right. And so that's where I think you have to look hard at. I always come back to in this, yes, I think there's probably a little bit of culpability in terms of the school, but honestly, the bigger culpability to me is she has a gun at 15.
Sure, and that's on parents.
And that's parents.
Yep.
And so as much as people want to point fingers at different places, she has a gun. Now, again, did she sneak the gun into her house? I don't know. Did her mom, dad, parents, I don't even know who she lived with. Are they checking her room? Is this rage that she clearly was expressing? I mean, we've seen our kids get into funks or get upset or get frustrated. And that's when your eyes should be more on them more than ever. And that's when you have to say, your room in this house is my room in this house, and I'm going to be in it whenever I want, and I'm going to be looking wherever I want to be. We're going to be having conversations. I don't know what kind of church relationship this family had. I don't know anything about that. So
but it
regardless
matters.
of all that, it all matters. Right.
That home life matters, and I think that's what a good Christian school has to know. Are we dealing with what is the home life? And by the way, you got to kind of open your books on it a little bit. Public school maybe doesn't have the right to ask what's the family home life dynamic.
Right. And that's what I was saying.
Christian schools sure do.
Yes, there should be things in place. Again, that's one of the benefits, I think, and I could be speaking of something I don't fully know. That's one of the benefits of private Christian schools not taking certain money from certain entities, right? When you're not taking that money from someone, you are not beholden to anybody. You can go ahead and have whatever vetting system you want.
Well, let's be candid. The school that our daughter attends, she has mentioned to me, Dad, there are kids that have come in, mid-semester, mid-year, whatever, and they just don't like it. They hate it. They're angry. They've brought in all their garbage from outside with them.
Right.
And clearly their parents stuck them in here. They didn't want to be here. I don't think that's on the school to convert the kid into liking the Christian school experience.
But we also know from having conversations, our school specifically, and many that we've talked to have very emphatically said, we're not letting every family in that wants to come.
That's right. But to follow up, they've also said, this isn't working out. Goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a limit.
I think you have to have both those pieces, right? You have to be able to say, we don't think you're ready, and here's why. Go figure it out and come back, and we want you to come back. And I think that should be the prevailing attitude. Figure it out and come back, or sorry, this isn't working. We're gonna give grace. We're gonna have steps, but rage-filled hate.
Christian schools aren't counseling centers.
They're not, right.
They can't be sleepaway camps where kids try to get their minds right.
Right. And that's where I think people make a mistake, because yes, it's missional. But to what extent, to what point? And I do believe there is a fit for people. This girl, she needs something. She needs something. And I do think there are places and there are individuals and there are groups that can help meet that need. But we have talked about this. I don't care where you teach or what you do. A teacher, I am not a counselor as a teacher. Now, I'm sure there are some that are. I'm not. So when you put somebody like a very troubled kid in a class, it causes all kinds of chaos and havoc. I am not equipped as a teacher to wade through that, nor is that my job. I don't think it's the Christian school, public school's job to wade through the mess. Maybe more public school, you got to take what you got to take, and that's half of what we talk about all the time. But a Christian school, I know there are people that would be like, well, that's not very Christian of you. Actually, I think it is, because we're saying in this school, this is the like-mindedness that we're looking for,
protecting
and
the
this
integrity.
family does not meet it.
Yeah, it's integrity.
Yes.
You have to protect the integrity of it.
Right.
It's not a sanctimonious thing. It's not a better than you thing,
Right.
but it is an integrity
Right.
thing.
And that's separate from an academic issue. We're more talking behavioral or emotional or mental or spiritual.
Yep.
They have a responsibility to do that. And I truly, while I have opinions on that, my heart breaks for the adults in there, because they're all walking a path that I can't even imagine.
Second grader called in.
I can't even. I don't know that I can talk about the second grader. I can't, because it'll break me.
Someone, I got to be careful, I guess, because I don't want to sound like I lack compassion here. I don't believe this should have happened, and I don't believe it couldn't have been prevented. Given what we know right now, and maybe someone will come out with some information later, I don't believe at a Christian school of 400 kids, this couldn't have been prevented. I just don't believe it. I believe, given what we know right now, this was a troubled child injected into a system that just wasn't ready, and that school couldn't deal with or couldn't handle whatever troubled her, and she shouldn't have been there. I'll just bet you anything, and if I'm wrong, like I said, I'll come back on the show and say I was wrong, but I have a hunch I'm not.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree at all.
All right. Well, and
I hate doing this kind of conversation.
Well, look, the thing is, Christian schools now twice. The first time was Covenant Christian, and an outside nut who used to attend
to go there.
Now identifies as a male, shot up to school, and that's, I think, a little different. This is a student inside a Christian school. I don't know if it's the first of its kind, but it's very, very rare. That it's a girl is even more rare.
But I will say, this is the other thing, too, when we do talk about advocating for Christian schools, nowhere, no system, no building, no nothing is ever perfect. And as we have said, 100%, there's no guarantee. There's kids that are going to go through Christian school for all 12 years, and they're going to walk away, and they're going to denounce their faith, and they're going to do what they're going to do. It's not a Band-Aid, and it's not a cure-all. It's not without its imperfections. It's not without its flaws, which is why we have always talked about, encouraging parents specifically, look at everything. But if you're going to go into a Christian school, ask them, find out, what has your vetting system been like? Where are you tweaking it? What are you looking at as you move forward? How have you reassessed since the shooting that happened last year?
When a family has a troubled child at a high school, what's your policy on the Smith family bringing their troubled child from middle school and high school and putting them in this school? Right. What's your policy on that? How does that work out?
Because there's, your people will say open door, but I don't
think so.
I don't believe that.
No, I think guarded doors, healthily guarded doors.
Yes.
So had to address that. We felt we had to address it. Hate that we had to, but wanted to tackle that because we're going to transition now into something that's also in the news, and something that it occurred to one of our great producers, Matt. We were talking about the confirmation process. Donald Trump now entering his second term, President-elect Trump. He's been filling all of his cabinet picks quickly. One of them, and one of the most high-profile picks, is Pete Hegseth, the now former Fox News host. And it kind of dawned on us as we were sitting around talking about Pete Hegseth one day in the office, hey, he was on our show. Remember that?
He was.
It's been a bit now.
Yes.
Pete is a father of many kids, a blended family.
7 kids.
All of whom, if I remember correctly, are homeschooled?
They are all in
class.
It was classical Christian the last time we talked to him, which was it was over a year ago, probably about a year and a half ago. And at that point, he over a process of, I think, 2 to 3 years, they like slowly started extracting their kids out from wherever they were. They moved them, I think, from public school to Catholic school. And then from there, they were like, nope. And then they went into this classical Christian school. And so I think when we were talking to him, he was like, we're just moving our last ones in. So it didn't happen all at once. It was, was gradual.
Yeah, I'll grant you, this is not a conversation about the world in which he's about to walk into if he's confirmed as the next defense secretary. But it does give you, I think, a look into what makes Pete Hegseth tick. Mm-hmm. And if, in fact, he's our next defense secretary, maybe he can run over to the Department of Education and help Linda McMahon, who is the pick for the Secretary of Education.
Right, who might have a few little issues there, right?
Well, look,
I never know.
Everybody does, but I think everybody's probably going to get confirmed. The Republican majority in the Senate, save a couple who might give them trouble. I think these people are going to get confirmed. So we wanted to go ahead.
No, I was going to say I laughed when that announcement was made about him.
Yeah.
Because when I first heard it, I was like, well, Pete, the education guy, because I really only knew his background from what we had talked about when he wrote. I think The Battle for the American Mind. That was his book that we were talking about with him or you were talking about it with him. And I was like, for defense, I'm like, interesting. And of course, I did not realize his background beyond that. I just was like, oh, okay, well, the education guy. Like, that's how I think of him. So that's my naivete right there.
No. He's a smart guy. He's a well-versed guy in many different subjects, combat in particular.
Right.
So I think he'll make a terrific defense secretary as a personal note. But he also has a great family life, despite what you've read. He loves his wife and he loves all of these kids, and they care deeply about how their kids are educated. So we thought we'd have a little refresher.
Yes.
The potential next defense secretary of the United States and a conversation we had with him about education. Take a listen. Pete, welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
And I congratulate you, and I mean this earnestly. You seem to be a real fan favorite. I have watched your work, and I've kind of watched you over the years. People really love what you do and what you stand for. You have a passion, particularly for the field of education, it seems.
Well, I appreciate that. I think I do. I'm so grateful for the platform. Fox is an amazing place to be able to talk about the things that really matter, what people are really feeling. And I think, in the book, we talk about the COVID-16-19 moment, which is what we call it, when the classroom came into our homes because of COVID and people almost immediately were exposed to what had been hidden from them in the classroom. And what felt like an academic problem or something that was far away was suddenly confronting all of us, and that includes me. So in many ways, I'm learning along with the audience and exploring it too. And, Fox is the biggest rated network for a reason because we have an amazing audience, and I think they're dialed into the erosion of the same things we see. Faith has been stripped out of the public square, not to mention the public classroom. Families are under assault. Basics like gender, you're defining you by your race are now what the left wants everything defined by. And it brings these issues which felt political and cultural and somewhere else into everybody's lives. And so I'm a dad, I've got a bunch of kids, and I worry about the world they're going into, the country they're inheriting. And it's on us to do something about it, to give them a fighting chance. So the book, Battle for the American Mind, is a gift to them and hopefully to everyone else's kids and grandkids to say, here's what we can do. Here's what you can do right now if you want to affect the sphere around you, which also obviously has impacts on our country and our culture.
If you don't mind me being personal, and it's none of my business, I'm just curious because you mentioned that you have kids. I'll share with you my situation first, just to prove to you that I'm being honest broker when I ask you this question. I have 3 kids, and we pulled our youngest daughter out of public education and put her into a private Christian school in the last year. If we had it to do all over again, Pete, we would have put all 3 of our kids in a Christian education. My 2 sons are about to finish out high school, so we're going to kind of let them ride it out. But if I had it to do all over again, I'd do it differently, just because of the kind of the degradation of the public school system. I was curious about your kids' own upbringing and their educations. If you've had a change.
I had the same learning experience. I mean, I was a public school kid. My dad was a public school teacher. I assumed they would all go to public school. That was, if good enough for me, good enough for them.
Right.
That was the mindset for sure. Yes, I just next school year will finally have all my kids, all 7 of them, in classical Christian school.
Wow.
2 years ago they were in public school, and then we moved them to a Catholic school, and even that in my mind,
Yes.
was not giving them the best of the best. And it's just, to me, it's the kind of fact where we're even moving. We're moving to a school. So in order to do that, I look at, it feels like a ticking clock.
Yes.
Like every moment they're not in a classroom that reinforces the things that we care about, I feel like I'm losing time. And so, listen, it's mostly on the home and the church and the parents to fortify, and that's what you're doing. But at the end of the day, why wouldn't I want a school that reinforces that as well? So it's been a journey and a learning experience, but we're finally to a point where, and they're all young, thank goodness, so they'll go through it. But we'll have a sixth grader who's going into classical Christian for the first year, so he'll have a number of years. But it does feel like a little bit of catch up, and the options are out there now, thank God.
And I will say, Pete Hegseth's book, by the way, is Battle for the American Mind, Uprooting a Century of Miseducation. I'm battling real resentment because, like you, as a product of public education, and my parents, my mother and wife were both public educators too, it breaks my heart. It makes me angry because it really, my daughter is a seventh grader. She's willing, she's ready, she's doing it, she's enjoying it, but it's been a transition, and I kind of resent it. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I resent that we have to do this.
Oh, my goodness. You're exactly right. In fact, the biggest feedback I've gotten on the book is from teachers, saying thank you for writing this, and it's spot on. But second of all, how angry they are at the fact that this entire huge part of our society has been co-opted right underneath our noses. This is not an issue of our teachers good.
That's right.
This is about the pipelines that are forcing teachers in a certain direction, and you can't live your values in the classroom unless you are part of the left-wing educational industrial complex. And as a result, here's the scary part. The whole idea that you can move to a zip code or a conservative community and that'll be reflected in your local public school is gone.
Yes.
The pipeline of what feeds that school, the unions, the accreditation, the teachers' colleges, it all comes from the same places. So yes, you may have a great conservative community, but the teachers in that school had to go through a certain program which molds them in a certain direction. Now most of the curriculum is mostly federalized at this point anyway, that they've entirely co-opted this treasure that was our public school system. And for patriots and Christians looking for an alternative, it's just not an option. It shouldn't be an option. And the problem is we pay property taxes.
Yep.
We work hard, and 2 jobs. How do you afford it? It's a real challenge. I mean, school choice is a part of it, but we also have to build our own schools.
Hey, and that's why that Supreme Court, I mean, Pete, you know better than anybody, that's why the Supreme Court ruling this week is so huge, yes?
Huge. I mean, by the way, that is only the latest in a long line of attempts by the government and the left to block any other schooling other than public school. I mean, they almost banned homeschooling.
Yes.
I believe it was in the 80s. They tried to ban it federally. They tried to ban Christian education in Oregon back in the early 20th century. And this was an attempt to block parents' ability to decide where their kids go because they don't live close enough to a public school in a rural area. Huge win from the Supreme Court, and parents need to take advantage of the latitude they've gained because of a good ruling.
The book is called Battle for the American Mind, Uprooting a Century of Miseducation. Pete, what have you learned about, here's something that's just kind of shocked my conscience over the last couple of years, and that's the role of the school board, or the inactivity in some cases. I find they kind of fall into one of two camps, sort of a subversive element that's very, very knowledgeable to the detriment of the culture and the community and the kids and the school and the teachers, and then the other who's sort of I don't know, maybe well-intentioned, but too busy to pay attention and just sort of rubber stamps whatever the radicals want. That's kind of what I've seen our school boards made up of.
I think that's fair. I mean, most of our school boards, if we're being honest, have been co-opted by the teachers' unions.
Yes.
They're effectively arms of the unions. They're reps. They're low-profile races. Most people aren't paying attention. And so as a result, radicals or hand-picked school board members end up winning. Thankfully, there's been a change in that. We're seeing, conservatives and patriots run for school boards and win once they know what's at stake. But and I say this in the book, and I mean it kindly because I love what people are doing standing up at their school boards. But I call that, it's kind of like charging a fortified machine gun nest with Nerf guns. Mm-hmm. Like, we salute your efforts, but you're probably going to die because the institutions are so big and strong and powerful that they squelch dissent. So if you're going to run for school board, you better put on the armor of God and go in there being ready to fight, because otherwise nothing's going to change.
And what you said is, we've been hammering this home too. Don't assume that just because your child is enrolled in a Christian school, a Catholic school, a private school, don't assume the radical stuff can't permeate those places too.
Oh my goodness, it's worse in some of those places.
Yeah,
especially some of the more elite schools. And if I would say this, I say this kindly as well, sort of casually Christian schools, like we sprinkle a little God on top.
Yeah,
the progressive prerogatives. I mean, this is where the story of the takeover is so important in the book Battle for the American Mind. Even if you're in a private school that is Christian, the curriculum is progressive. The progressives rewrote the curriculum 100 years ago and the structure of school. So the bell ringing, that's a progressive thing. The social studies, 7 periods in the day. Even the Pledge of Allegiance was created by a socialist. It didn't say under God originally. It was meant to form allegiance to the state and pull kids away from God. So it's a twisted story when you read it all, but it helps you understand how they've captured it. So when you're taking social studies with your new prerogatives, you're taking a progressive view of education that is not how our founders were ever educated, steeped in Greek and Latin and history and great books. That's all been stripped out, and that's what we're trying to rediscover.
Final question, Pete Hegseth, the book Battle for the American Mind, Uprooting a Century of Miseducation. I am not bullish on public education at all. In fact, with this Supreme Court ruling, I kind of wonder if in the next 10 years we're not going to see a wholesale, with the report of massive teachers migrating out of public education, leaving early, retiring, quitting. Couple that with students and parents that are moving on to other private forms of education. I don't know that this is sustainable, is it?
I don't think it is, and I hope it's not, frankly. That's what we argue for in the book, is that I think parents should retreat from the public schools, find alternatives for their kids, start alternatives. We should fight for universal educational tax credits so the dollars follow the parents. And once public schools feel under threat, you would hope, based on market competition, they'll be forced to respond to the consumer and create a product that actually delivers. Because I don't want to leave kids behind in failing schools.
No.
In inner cities or rural areas where there aren't many or any options. They need to get better as well. So I think the system has to collapse in order to change, because going along with the status quo is not going to get it done.
So there you go. Little kind of year-end retrospective that was unintentional, but interesting.
Good points. He made some really, really good points throughout there that were, at the time, we were brand new to us doing what we were doing.
Yep.
And since then, we're 3 years down the road on that now. And I find myself like, yes, go, Pete has, go.
Yeah, it's
you
cool.
Got it.
It's really cool. So
yes.
We were appreciative to be able to look back on that and get a little peek behind the curtain of the guy.
Knew him back when.
And it's also nice to know somebody like that on a human level, as a father and a husband, and the way he views raising children.
Right.
So when you start seeing the news reports about what a monster he is,
or he's too professional, he's too what's the word that keeps getting thrown around? Not professional.
Oh no, he lacks professional. They don't think he's professional. That's the problem.
Okay, well then I'm thinking of the wrong person too in some of the things, because I keep thinking that hearing that he's not set for that job, that he doesn't lack the experience needed, or he doesn't have the experience needed.
They say he's not a highly esteemed, decorated leader.
I guess that's
in the
one.
military.
Yes, the opposite. Right.
Yeah,
right.
Which I think right now, highly esteemed, decorated leaders have not worked out well.
Right.
So we wish Pete Hegseth the best. And we thank you very much for downloading the show and listening. Hope you'll give it a 5-star review, a written review at Apple Podcast, as well as Spotify and anywhere else you may have the opportunity to rate it or leave a review. Reach out to us if you'd like, by the way, on social media, however you wish, and we'd love to hear from you. Until next week, we hope you have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll see you back here again on Making the Leap.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. We'd love your feedback by rating us and commenting on the show.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Making the Leap.